Nowadays, the international community is more and more aware of the changes occurring in the Earth's climate system. The issue of climate change is very complex, and often, since information is inaccurate or just lacking, misinterpretations on the issue in society are very common. Floods, hurricanes, landslides, extreme dry spells due to the absence of rainfall, and all the related consequences such as famine, epidemics, and diseases are more and more frequent phenomena intensified by climate change caused by human activity. This worsens the living conditions of millions of people, particularly in the countries of the Southern Hemisphere. In fact, while the developed nations of the world produce the majority of greenhouse gas emissions, developing nations will bear the brunt of impacts, since populations are poorer and thus more vulnerable and less equipped to cope with extreme weather events. We know that climate change will mainly affect the most vulnerable populations, but the whole world will also be affected, although some countries will experience different impacts and fewer immediate effects. It is very likely that ecosystems will disappear, and the gradual loss of biodiversity will occur, as well as negative impacts on health, food security, and human development. These facts could irreversibly compromise the survival of the planet and its species, including humankind. Since 1960, the international community has started taking the issue of climate change seriously. From then on, it became more and more evident that changes in the climate system are linked to the excessive use of fossil fuels to pursue unsustainable living standards in industrialized countries. This cannot match the strategies adopted by developing countries to provide food, water, electricity, healthcare, and education for their communities. Furthermore, the burning of fossil fuels and the irresponsible use of natural resources are the leading causes of global warming. As regards the greenhouse effect, it is a natural phenomenon that has always existed in the history of the planet. One of the compounds of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, CO2, produced both naturally, for instance through the respiration of living beings, and from the burning of materials containing carbon, such as petrol, coal, and wood. Scientists have long denounced the rapid increase in the concentration of the main gases contributing to the rise in the Earth's temperature. Hence, more frequent and intense phenomena such as hurricanes, droughts, and floods are the result of the mechanism chosen by our planet to find energy balance. According to research, the atmosphere is very vulnerable to carbon dioxide, and the fact that its effects are manifested after decades instead of centuries is an alarming piece of data. As already mentioned, the burden of the impact of climate change will be more severe on the countries of the Southern Hemisphere. In particular, desertification represents one of the main causes of poverty in Africa, and it is the leading cause behind the phenomenon of environmental refugees, people forced to flee their homes mainly because of droughts or desertification to survive elsewhere. This has thus led to identify specific aspects that are influenced by climate change, such as health and biodiversity. Climate change and all the related consequences are a serious threat to global human health. According to the World Health Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme, at least 12 million people die each year because of global warming. Due to changing temperatures, humidity, and rainfall, climate change influences the reproduction and distribution of certain vector-borne parasitic diseases such as malaria and yellow fever. These pathologies become widespread in different geographical areas, even in places where they were once non-existent. Not to mention the fact that traffic, eating, and industries are additional factors that contribute to the worsening of our health, generating ultrafine particles that are particularly hazardous. Or the fact that, following the depletion of the stratospheric ozone, the prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth became more harmful, causing millions of melanomas and eyes problems. Global biodiversity is constantly threatened by human activity as well. Deforestation is the main human activity that causes the loss of biodiversity, since it also contributes to global warming by means of greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere due to the destruction of forests and habitats. A possible rise in sea levels due to the shrinking of the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets could also cause serious impacts on ecosystems and biodiversity. Plastic pollution is another major factor contributing to the loss of biodiversity. In oceans and seas, there is a great deal of plastic that alters ecosystems and contaminates the food chain. It is a serious threat to marine species and, as a result, to humankind. As regards political initiatives to combat climate change, the first to be adopted is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then we have the Kyoto Protocol that, despite the criticism, represents a step towards a future international agreement on climate change. In fact, it was replaced by the Paris Accord, held in 2015. The latter is a cornerstone in the fight against climate change, although we do not know what will happen in the future. Nonetheless, it is only by acting individually, through our daily choices, that we can reduce the impact of ongoing climate change. The commitment of each citizen of the world is fundamental, and as we have become more aware of how serious the environmental situation is, it has become necessary to change our consumption habits and lifestyles in order to thwart the threat posed by climate change and ensure well-being for all forms of life and for our planet, which is our common home.